Okay, I'm going to warn you now. Disney references incoming warning. Okay. Um, you're going to get a lot of Disney references thrown at you during this video, but it is a One Piece based video too. So, um, last week in the review that I did for the chapter, I mentioned that I was working on something where I kind of mentioned Pirates of the Caribbean. So this is kind of that video, which is Disney property. I'm also going to talk about Moana. It's also a Disney property. And hearts. Hence why I have a necklace that looks like a heart. So, and Imu-Sama. There is a connection here, I promise you. Or at the very least, my brain found a connection. Obviously, parts of this concept are going off of the little bits that we know about Im, which is like that they look somewhat thin, possibly tall. They sit on a chair that's at the center of the world, and the entire world belongs to them. Tends to be the general consensus in the community at this point in time. There's different theories where Im is a man, Im is a woman, Im is a ghost, Im is immortal, Im is some variation of one of these things. Or some combination of all of these things, depending on stuff. I'm someone that tends to pay a fair amount of attention to mythology. And one of the things that I kind of noticed, or that kind of came to mind based on some of the other stuff that like Vegapunk told us about, like Mother Earth, Mother Nature, Mother Ocean, however you want to phrase it, is, well, Imu-Sama, or Imu-Sama, Imu-Sama, whichever one you want to go with, seems to be someone that is exceedingly powerful, but exceedingly shadowy of a figure. And given that we don't know that much about them at the moment, I kind of was trying to think of like, well, is there, the One Piece is supposed to be a treasure that reveals the true history of something. And things that have happened in, Moana, for reference, and in Pirates of the Caribbean, is that there are these exceedingly powerful beings, goddesses, who have had something kind of taken away from them or sealed from them, and they need it back or else they're not whole. And I kind of thought that maybe something similar could apply to Imu-Sama. So I'm going to kind of lay out my argument for that. And if I end up being wrong and Imu-Sama is just a horrible person who's been around for 800 years or whatever, was around before the Void Century and is now just the ruler of the world until they're toppled, depending on however that works, they are an evil god or evil goddess or just an evil person that had the immortal surgery or whatever the case may be, then so be it. And I'll be like, fine, I'm not the only one that came up with these concepts, so it's fine. So some baseline stuff here. So in regards to the Moana stuff, in Moana there is the goddess that is called Fiti, and she is this entity that appeared in the world. She's supposed to be like the first entity that appeared in the world and inhabited only by the ocean. Now, Te Fiti is not part of the ocean. The ocean is a separate entity in Moana. And what ends up happening is Te Fiti is this life-giving, she has this life-giving heart, the necklace that we see Moana carry throughout the course of the movie, the stone inside of the necklace, that Te Fiti used this power in order to, spread the gift of life across the ocean and, make islands. And part of the mythology, Maui, used his hook to bring up the islands, and then, Te Fiti liked to watch as humanity spread and, found the islands and inhabited them and then ventured even more and everything, sailing about, kind of similar to how it is on One Piece, where there's only really islands. Admittedly, Moana is taking place within the confines of, Oceania in regards to like the Pacific, islands and stuff like that. Maui, Fiji, Hawaii, different places along those lines. Those would have been the islands that they would, Easter Island, those would have been the islands that they would have been inhabiting. That's where that culture comes from. Pacific Islander, stuff like that. And throughout the course of, the opening of the movie, we get it that, once Fiti, created, so much and everything, and she laid down to rest, then Maui showed up and stole the heart of Fiti, stole the gem from her. And then there was this creature called Taka, who was this chaotic spirit that just had nothing but lava and death and everything, and just, kept trying to get the heart. So many other creatures wanted to get the heart and everything. And for 1,000 years, the heart was lost. And then it was given to this little girl who proved herself, Moana. Spoilers for the movie. There's going to be a lot of spoilers in this for that, but it's been out for long enough, and if you haven't seen it yet, that's kind of on you, and if you haven't seen it by now, then you don't really care about spoilers, so take your pick. Same thing with the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. For reference, I have not watched the Pirates of the Caribbean movies in a while, but I still remember a bunch of this stuff from it that I'm going to talk about when I get to the character in that I'm referencing. For 1,000 years, Taka rages, and this darkness, this kind of poison stuff, spreads from island to island, destroying every island, and eventually it does make its way to Moana's island, where it starts infecting the food and the crops and different things like that, and where it starts infecting the island itself, and where it's technically supposed to slowly kill the island. Moana gets the heart of Fiti, she proves herself, and she heads off with the ocean, finds Maui, convinces him that he has to help her, find strength in herself, and then they have to make their way to Taka. When they reach Taka, when they reach the place where Fiti is supposed to be, they find Taka there, guarding it. And via Moana and Maui working together, after they both kind of lose faith in themselves, and then Moana has a great song, and then Moana gets a lot of great songs. Maui gets a bunch of good ones too. And then they're able to get to, by working together, they're able to get to where they need to be. And when Moana gets to where, Fiti is supposed to be resting, all we find is just giant hole in the ocean where Fiti was supposed to be. And Moana puts it together that Fiti and Taka are the same being. It's just Taka is Fiti without their heart. Fiti's heart is what gives her the power to create life and to be this malevolent being, whereas Taka is this horrible being of lava and destruction and is scared of the ocean, as opposed to Fiti, who cared for it. Because Taka, like a devil fruit user, cannot go in the ocean without feeling pain. Mostly because they're made of magma, and magma and water don't always mix. And Moana, via, of course, singing a song, she sings, You Know Who You Are, which I just... Side note, I love the songs in Moana. I have a whole video where I do a review of Moana. I love the songs. Lin-Manuel Miranda and the others that were a part of it did an amazing job on all of the songs in the movie. All the singers did an amazing job for singing. All of it. Great. And Moana is able to connect with Fiti, to Taka, and remind Taka of who they actually are, and that allows Moana to then return the heart to Taka, and that results in Taka returning to Fiti, returning to what they were supposed to be, because their heart has been restored. And then that allows Fiti, now fully back into herself and into her right mind, with her heart restored to where it should be, is able to then kind of reverse what Taka did. Is able to restore, the other islands to health, save Moana's island, and restore the area around her own island into being this beautiful, lush, tropical paradise type thing. And, she sets Moana on, off back to her, back to her island. And Moana is able to show her people how they can continue to travel because they hadn't traveled for 1,000 years. They'd been stuck on their islands for 1,000 years because of Te Kā and because of a bunch of the other monsters that were roaming around. And now, since those monsters have been defeated and Te Kā is no longer a threat because Te Fiti is restored, they're able to now continue sailing. I have a whole other video where I talk about the fact that I think that Moana is possibly an ancestor of like Lilo and Nani from Lilo and Stitch. I'm like, yep, I like that. It's not that Moana can't be an ancestor of like thousands of other people as well in that regard, because however far off in the past that was supposed to be, there's a good distance there. But so there's that comparison with the fact that Te Fiti is this being that needed to have something restored to them, have their heart restored to them, that allowed them to become their full self again. And then into the Pirates of the Caribbean setup, I want to talk about Tia Dalma, or Calypso. Now, Calypso is, in mythology, she is a daughter of Atlas. She's a goddess or a titan, depending on which way you want to put it, and she's a daughter of Atlas. And she's just one of the other various deities that deals with the ocean. In Pirates of the Caribbean, they shifted around into the quote that I have here is, Calypso, an old legend. No, the goddess herself, bound in human form, fury or favor, you not knowing, but when the mood strikes her and it's her favor, she bestows a lucky sailor. Well, you've heard legendary. Where it's supposed to be that, Calypso at one point in time was this very powerful goddess, very beautiful. Her symbol was the crab, so she tended to also take like the form of hundreds and thousands of crabs and stuff like that, depending on, the mood that struck her, which, they're a goddess, so, whatever mood decides to strike them. And, they were a goddess of the sea. They could bless sailors or give them a misfortune, grant them favors, or just decide to destroy them if they made her angry or caught her on a bad day or whatever. Typical god stuff. All that typical god stuff. And it's revealed that a woman, he fell in love. No, I heard it was the sea he fell in love with. Same story, different versions, and all true. See, it was a woman as challenging and harsh and untamable as the sea. Him never stopped loving her, but the pain it caused was too much to live with, but not enough to cause him to die. And it's this concept of, this immortal being falling in love with a human falling in love with an immortal being, as is done in countless variations of literature. Literature, myth, take your pick, video games, movies, television, all that stuff. That is a trope that plays again and again and again. And where it's just like, oh, they will do everything they can to be with them. And in some cases, it results in, the deity giving up their immortality to be with the person that they have fallen in love with. And then they live out their lives with that person happily. In other cases, it's, the human does something that proves that they are worth being proclaimed an immortal and given the new position of a god or a goddess, and, allowed to be at the side of the deity that they are in love with. Something where they're given eternal life and they are able to live on happily with the person, with the deity that they are now bound to. Or, after they die, then their soul is, left with the deity and turned into a deity of its own or something like that, depending on the mythology or however you want to put it. Some I see as romantic, some I see as like, hey, that's how you want to spend the rest of eternity, that's fine. Um, um, so there's all of that stuff. And in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, it is revealed that Tia Dalma, who is this voodoo witch doctor that we see, I believe she shows up in the second movie, because Curse of the Black Pearl at World's End is the third one, but I don't remember what the second one is. As I said, it's been a while since I've seen it. It's been a little while since I've watched the movies. Sorry. I like them. It's just been a while, and I didn't have time to rewatch all of them before doing this video, so I just had to do my research. But she's a voodoo witch doctor, and it is revealed partway through the movie, kind of near the the last third of the movie, that she is actually Calypso, the goddess Calypso, bound in human form, because it is stated that when, according to the legend, Calypso fell in love with Davy Jones before all of the squid tentacle stuff. And she rewarded that love by giving him the Flying Dutchman, which was this amazing ship. The Flying Dutchman is also, of course, referenced in One Piece, and the fact that it's, Vanderdecken's ship, so there's a reference there. And, he was given this job of collecting all of the souls who had died at sea, and then, supposed to ferry them to the underworld, or ferry them into the next life. And Jones eventually did not care for this anymore, and he gathered together this first Brethren Court of Pirates, and ended up tricking Calypso, and then having the help of all of these other pirates, trapped her, removed her heart from her, bound her powers, and then trapped her in human form. As, I don't remember, I'm sure it's like stated somewhere along that like he fell out of love with her, or he still loved her so much, but he couldn't, he's trapped in this cycle of having to be this ferryman for the dead, and blah, 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 blah. However the case goes. Again, as I said, it's been a while since I've watched the movie. I apologize. But there's love involved here. And probably some scorned hearts. And this will to control the ocean. And eventually it is, they trap Calypso, they steal her power away within the, the 9 pieces of 8. Stupid name, as is pointed out in the movie. It's a bunch of junk. And Calypso is then, for however several hundred years or whatever, left as as a mortal woman in a mortal body. And she ends up making herself into a voodoo doctor, and she takes up the alias of Tia Dalma. And then eventually, throughout the course of the second and the third movies, we find out that, mostly through the third movie, she has all of this knowledge and everything, which is just kind of put up to stock of like, oh, she's a witch doctor. She studied a bunch of this stuff, read books, learned things, all this other stuff. She knows a lot of this stuff because she's a freaking goddess trapped in a human body, and that's why she knows so much. Don't make the goddess trapped in the human body angry. The squid face guy learned that because he got cursed, and that's why he has a tentacle face. Oh boy. And what ends up happening is, of course, eventually Tia Dalma, she resurrects Barbarossa, and then she has him help her along with the others eventually get it to the point where she is then freed. And, is able to restore her own power as Calypso, and then she, wreaks havoc all over the place. And I don't remember exactly what happens with her, but I thought there was something where they talked about like her either reuniting with Davy Jones after he's defeated by Elizabeth and William and Captain Jack and whatever else. I don't remember exactly. As I said, it's been a while since I've watched those movies. And, her power is restored. And part of the way they do that is they have to burn the 9 pieces of 8 in front of her, and then they have to release her by whispering to her as a lover. And again, it's bringing this concept of love, of a heart being restored into it. Although I do like the fact that it's like Barbossa tries to do this and it doesn't work. And then it's like the one guy that had like the wooden eye the entire time just kind of like And he's like, well, you have to do it in a specific way. And then he just like leans in and he's just like, Calypso, I release you. And then that's just like, okay, lady, calm down. And, she's freed and she turns into the giant woman. And it's just like, yeah, good luck trying to trap the goddess with ropes. Yes, because that worked so well. She turns into crabs and like just scurries off the ship after she like, I'm sure probably like causes a fair amount of like pain with the snips all over the people. And eventually goes back into the sea. She a battle rages on, and eventually Davy Jones is killed, and supposedly he's welcomed back into her arms by the sea's embrace, because Calypso, even after all this time and after all he did, is still in love with him. Showing this eternal devotion in that regard. She never fully stopped loving him and all of that stuff. And kind of what I wanted to get to is, in One Piece, as I said, we have Imu-Sama, however you want to put it. And they are, the de facto king of the world. The Gorosei bow down to them. The rest of the Tenryubito probably don't know they exist. Debate about whether or not, like, Kong may know they exist, but I doubt it. But that, like, they are this de facto leader of the world, and that what they want, they get. Oh, I need this light snuffed out because they are a threat. Destroy these different pirates and then, like, bring me Nefeltari Vivi. Blah, 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 blah. We see all of that throughout the course of the 2 Reverie arcs. And the little bits that we get to see Imu-Sama. That, the Gorosei defer to them. And things like that. And we don't know if there's ever, eventually we will probably find out who Imu-Sama actually is. Are they this being that's been around for, over 800 years since the Void Century or before the Void Century? Are they a goddess or a god? Or are they a title that gets passed down? That, there was an Imu-Sama back then, and then, that person married and had a child and, like, just continued on down the line, and, like, it's just this position because they hold the blood of Imu-Sama, of the original one, or however the title may go. We have giants in One Piece that are exceedingly long-lived, but not that long-lived to the point where they are, 800, 900 years old and know what happened in the Void Century. And because we know that the immortal surgery has been mentioned, we know that it was that Law could use it. Blackbeard referenced it in the last chapter and everything. And all of that stuff, there's a lot of theories. I know that, like, maybe Law will end up using it on Luffy at one point in time. That, like, maybe Dr. Kureha had the immortal surgery used on her, and that's why she's so old and so still very healthy. And even though she drinks like a fish. Every time we see her, she's drinking. Even at the Reverie, she was drinking. Okay, woman. And just, all this other stuff where, maybe Im was one of the people that had the immortal surgery performed on them, and then maybe every so often, depending on how long that surgery lasts, it looks like, yeah, you're immortal. Does that mean that you will no longer age after the age where you had the surgery done on you? And even if you are immortal, does that just mean that you're immune from dying from old age or dying from disease? But, like, if someone still, it's One Piece, someone could stab you or someone could shoot you or whatever the case may be, and would that kill you that way? But, other than that, you can't really die from disease or from old age or something like that. If that's the way that the immortal surgery works. We don't exactly know. And then, of course, there's, the reason that I wanted to bring up, Fiti and bring up Calypso is that, so many people think that maybe Imu-Sama is a woman. And then that maybe at some point in time they were in love with Joy Boy, because we know Joy Boy was the other figure around during the Void Century. One of the figures around during the Void Century. You don't know if Imu-Sama goes back that far. But if it was that if Imu-Sama had been in love with Joy Boy, then maybe it was this whole war that happened between, the 20 kings and the Great Kingdom. You know, maybe it was a war that was forced, a war that came from a lie, and that no one was ever able to actually like prove that it was a lie, or even afterwards it was too late because they were already at war. Kind of, I guess, like what happens in the way that they play it out in the Game of Thrones series, where it's just like, Robert's rebellion was built on a lie about Lyanna being stolen by Rhaegar, like that type of a thing. Lots of wars have been started on a lie, or on information that ended up being faulty, or on different things along those lines. So there's prerequisites for that in history. And kind of my thought is that, well, if Imu-Sama is this, goddess or whatever that has been around for that amount of time, maybe there was, if there was this connection with Joy Boy, then maybe just like kind of like Shirahoshi and the Ancient Weapons, they're waiting for Joy Boy to reappear. And now that Luffy has appeared with being able to awaken, the Nikan Devil Fruit, that maybe that will awaken something inside of Imu-Sama. And kind of the thought that I had is that we know that there's a giant straw hat in like the freezers of Pangaea Castle. What if Imu-Sama keeps that hat around as a reminder, and Luffy reminds them of that? Like maybe Shanks did, because Shanks had the straw hat, so many years ago, and Roger had the straw hat before that, before he hit to Shanks, and now Luffy has it, and Luffy has made it his own. Maybe other pirates have popped up over the years with other straw hats, and maybe they sometimes make Imu-Sama remember something about Joy Boy. They know that this hat is important, but maybe they don't know exactly why. Maybe it is Imu-Sama has a bunch of this power, and they are able to control certain things, and that's why the Gorosei fear them. But maybe Imu-Sama actually lost their heart. Maybe that was something where during all these battles with the Great Kingdom, 800 years ago during the Void Century, maybe eventually Imu-Sama lost their heart. And, maybe it was like something like physically was, trapped away from them. Maybe, the Opnomi has the ability to remove someone's heart and then put it somewhere else, but the person still lives. I'm going to bring up another /Disney reference here. In Once Upon a Time series that was on ABC Family, I really, really love the series. They have the ability to physically remove someone's heart from their body, and then if you're holding the heart, you can control the person. And if the person, if you're holding the heart and you whisper into the heart, then you can control the person because you're holding their heart in your hand. And then if you crush their heart, then they die. And then if you put it back, they're able to, have their full freedom again. Also, if you keep the heart out of them for long enough, they kind of stop feeling emotions. They kind of stop feeling like the full force of their own emotions. As in, one of the characters that we see a lot, whose name is Cora, who is actually the mother of the evil queen of Regina. She takes out her own heart at one point in time, so that way she's not blinded by her own emotions. She's not blinded by, affection and love and things like that. So she's not, not accidentally going to fall in love again and lose her position. And she puts that aside and she keeps her heart somewhere else. And eventually it is restored to her, but that is decades later, when she's done all of this other horrible stuff, and now eventually she is restored with this heart, and she's actually able to feel how much she actually does love her own daughter, because it's not a muted feeling anymore. How much she's able to love her own daughters and able to actually see kind of the error of her ways. Not entirely the error of her ways, but she's able to see some of that more clearly because she's whole again. And we saw this with Te became, Te Fiti became this raging, horrible creature because they didn't have their heart. They didn't have their heart. Just like, yeah, I can find that on here. Heart. And when that is restored to them, they are, able to actually be whole again and have their true power, as opposed to this destructive power. They're able to be this thing that offers flourishing life instead of, destruction and death. And, maybe Imu-Sama isn't quite that way. Maybe Imu-Sama is more similar to Calypso in the fact that they are this deity that was bound in human form, and, maybe they either don't have their full memories, or maybe over time they've been manipulated enough by earlier members of the world government, because nowadays in the One Piece world, it would make sense that maybe not a lot of people know about Imu-Sama, but like even way back at the beginning, other people beyond who would have been like, I guess, the initial Gorosei or initial people had to have known about them. And then just through the erasure of history, through getting rid of all of this other history, and through, purging and things like that, and cleanses and all of this other stuff, people forgot about that there was an Imu-Sama. And, yes, there's the empty throne with all the swords in front of it that have been generations upon generations of kings and queens and whatever else that are allied with the world government, swearing themselves that way to not raise a sword against the world government, like we saw Stelly have to do. And, there's this whole thing where it's just like, well, if Imu-Sama's, heart, mind, however you want to put it, has been kind of sealed off from them, where they only know so much, then maybe it'll end up being that once, either if they meet Luffy, meet Joy Boy again, or have something restored to them, that they will be able to, actually be whole again. Vegapunk mentions, Mother Nature or Mother Ocean being, rejecting the people who have devil fruits because they go against nature. And so we see that whenever a devil fruit user goes into the water or whatever, then they, start to sink. They can't swim. And I kind of had this concept of, well, what if whenever a devil fruit user goes into the water, what if what ends up happening is it's the ocean trying to drag the person down, or drag them somewhere, not because it wants to kill them or because it wants to drown them, but because there's something down there in the ocean that needs to be found. The One Piece is on an island. It's on it's on Laugh-Tale. And, Odin and Roger, they got there too early. And now it's time for, all of this stuff to converge. And maybe it's like, oh, well, we got here too early because, like, it told us all the true history and everything like that. And, part of it was exceedingly funny and very amusing and everything like that. Very, technologically advanced world as compared to where One Piece is at the moment. Trying to use technology to be able to, separate someone's mind and body is not an unusual thing in, storytelling. There's lots of other ones where they try to separate someone's body and their consciousness. And if devil fruits existed at that point in time or came into existence during that time frame, then having devil fruits and trying to see what you could do with pushing the limits of them, since they are kind of fueled by your imagination in that regard, because, if you can think of the devil fruit type of a thing, then, eventually it might be there. And, we know that there's probably hundreds of different types of devil fruits all around the world. Some that, dozens of ones that all the dozens and dozens that we've seen already, plus all the additional ones that we just haven't seen or that have been mentioned and stuff like that. And, the poneglyphs, at whatever point in time, once Robin is able to actually read all of them and, get all the road poneglyphs, and then they all go to Laughtown and they find out what the true history is, a lot of us are expecting there to be some form of like a love story involved. Maybe between, Joy Boy and whoever the leader of the other side was of the 20 Kings, or maybe between, someone on their cruise, or some people involved. If there's a love story involved in this, that would make sense, because most epic stories in regards to, warring nations generally have a love story involved. With the Trojans and the Iliad, it's Helen of Sparta and Paris and her actual husband. With other stories, even with the Odyssey, it's Odysseus and his wife. Penelope, if I'm remembering correctly. It's like all of this other stuff where it's like most of those stories have some form of like a love story involved. Most of the Greek and Roman myths had a love story involved in them somewhere. Most epics have a love story involved. Not every single one, but most of them have some form of a love story involved in them as some form of an element. And in other cases, this doesn't quite tie into this, but in a lot of other ones, there's this case where there's this myth of like a sleeping king. Kind of the best known one is when it comes to King Arthur in Camelot, where, Arthur died in battle, and then his body has been resting on Avalon for the last, 1,000 years or whatever, waiting until England is in need of its true king again, and then he will rise again. Other mythologies have similar concepts where there is this sleeping king that is eventually waiting for their country to need them again, where their country will be in the most dire of need, and then they will rise and protect their country and lead their country into a new glorious age. And there's lots of thoughts where like, if Imu-Sama is a ghost, or if Imu-Sama is like an astral projection of something, where like maybe the person has been in a coma for a certain amount of time, or some form of a coma, kind of the way that Perona goes into like her sleeping phase when she would turn into her astral form initially. I think she's kind of gotten to the point where she doesn't need to do that as much anymore. But, similar things happen in that regard where, your consciousness can be separated from your body. And if your consciousness and your body are separated for too long, sometimes there's the concept of the id, the ego, and the superego, if you want to go into, Freudian stuff. Then having that be able to be separated out means that sometimes your base instincts are much less tampered, because your consciousness, your conscience is not there to actually help determine what is right and wrong, or what is the compassionate move, as opposed to what is the move that will give me the most amount of power. Maybe Imu-Sama is somewhat trapped in that type of a thing. Not saying that Imu-Sama is going to turn out to be an ally, after so many hundreds of years of being there at the lead of the world government, at the lead of all of the celestial dragons, and allowing them to do as they've done. Imu-Sama may have started off as somewhat good person who was maybe in love with, Joy Boy, and then ended up shifting and actually becoming into this horrid person, but still loved Joy Boy, and then they broke their heart. Or maybe they were brothers, or maybe they were a brother and a sister who saw things on a very different level of things. Joy Boy had the Nika Devil Fruit, the Gumma Gumma no Mi that Luffy has. Imu-Sama may have a different devil fruit that is a different version of a god or a goddess. And, maybe that's how they're able to have all of this power, and that's why the world government, the Gorosei, don't want to make them angry. Because you make them angry, we saw what they did to the Lucia Kingdom. If Imu-Sama has that amount of power, we know about the Buster Calls, we know about all this other stuff, other cleansing and stuff like that. Having that ability is not something all that surprising within the One Piece world. Having the ability to have this amount of power and be able to use that to cause lots of destruction is not surprising in the One Piece world. And maybe it is that once the Straw Hats get to Laugh-Tale and they're able to, read the poneglyphs and everything, and Robin tells them the true history, and we get the flashback, and we find out about Joy Boy and the 20 kings and all of this other stuff, and the Great Kingdom and all of this other stuff. Once that's revealed, and it's revealed, oh, these ones are allies, these ones are the other enemies, maybe we'll get a list of the other names of the other 20 kings, beyond the, handful, barely even a handful of the ones that we're aware of now. There's the whole thought where, like, Shanks is a celestial dragon because he's a Figureland and blah, 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 blah. Maybe maybe he's related to Imu-Sama. Maybe there's a connection there. And something else I wanted to point out is that in Moana, when Moana sees where Te Fiti had been, there's this giant hole in the ocean where Te Fiti was supposed to be. And then they mentioned that God Valley just vanished. That, it's not there anymore. After what happened there, after the God Valley incident, it's gone. No more God Valley. And, maybe it's just like there's nothing left of the island and it sank beneath the waves. Maybe there's just nothing left on it, period. But it's just like a pile of rubble and there's no reason going back there. Maybe there was a connection there. That was, almost 40 years ago that happened. So maybe there's a connection there. I'm not saying that they're going to go and find like the giant shape of like where God Valley was in the waves and the water is just going whoop, down away from it. I mean, we already have something similar to that within its lobby where the water just goes, down and then it just floats there. Physics, logic. Nope. Oda, I want to draw a cool island that just floats there and has eternal sunlight. Okay, sure. It's your manga. Sure. Are you going to explain it later? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. So, there's that concept. One of the other things, last thing that I did want to point out, is that one of the ways that Moana is able to reach Te Kā, reach the little bit of Te Fiti that is still there in Te Kā, is by showing them the heart and by singing. Now, it's a song that just Moana just kind of comes up with. Maybe it's a song that gets, that she's like heard her in her life. It's never stated, but it's the know who you are. And then in One Piece, there's a song that a lot of people like to equate back to the Void Century, and of course that's Bink Sake. And if there is this thing where like Bink Sake is actually kind of like this history of the One Piece that got passed down as a song, or history of the world that got passed down as a song, then I'm not saying if Brook shows up at like Barijwa and like plays his violin and like sings Bink Sake, like plays the shell, and Brook has the shell, the tone dial that has the song that was him and the Rumbar Pirates singing one last time all together, and that song is saved and that is there for him to play for Laboon. We know this. He's had it. He shows it to us at the end of Thriller Bark. We assume that he still has that shell inside of his head, or it's somewhere safe on Thousand Sunny. That seems like something exceedingly that, one of the others would be like, yeah, we'll put this in a very safe place on the Sunny, so that way we all know where it is, and then if anything happens, we can still get it back to Laboon, even if you're not able to. That type of a thing. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if that shell is somewhere very important on the ship. That like maybe Frankie has like a safe or something like that they put it in, along with some of their other stuff. Did we ever find out where they keep the money on Thousand Sunny? All of the treasure and stuff like that. Did we ever find that out? I don't remember if we ever find that out. But what ends up happening, Brook's intention is, of course, to get that, the tone dial back to Laboon and play it, so that way Laboon can hear the rest of the crew singing Bink Sake one more time, and all of that, and that's something that we're waiting for. What if that shell, that recording of Brook singing Bink Sake, ends up getting played, and Imu-Sama hears it? And this is going out on a limb, I know. What if that awakens something inside of them that they forgot about? Long lost memories, long dormant memories that either they tried to repress or that were hidden from them. Because we know that there is the memory devil fruit that Pudding has. What if parts of their memories were messed with by someone else. Now, whether or not pudding would be able to affect the memories of someone who's already been affected by a different user of the Mema no Mi is debatable. I went off on a very different tangent here, but I'm going to stick with it because it kind of goes along with what I was going with anyway. If Imu-Sama's memories were messed with, if someone else way back at the beginning of the world government had the power of the Mema no Mi, and if they were able to get a hold of Imu-Sama's memories and maybe manipulate them to make them think that Joy Boy was the enemy, or made them think that Joy Boy had betrayed them, or something along those lines, and maybe hid parts of their own memories from them, hid parts of Imu-Sama's memories, maybe down the line, because Imu-Sama didn't have their whole memories, they were twisted by the members of the world government back then, of the initial 20 families, of the initial 19 ones that formed it, that formed the Tenryubito. And then, as they were, somewhat manipulated in that regard, they still had all of this power, but they still had their memories tampered with. And then eventually, they lost the power of the devil fruit. Now they can't quite mess with Imu-Sama's memories anymore. At some point in time, the devil fruit was lost to them because eventually it ended up where, pudding now has it. And I'm not saying that pudding would be able to reverse all of that happen, because we don't know if someone who is a new holder of the devil fruit could reverse something that was done by a previous user of a devil fruit. I would assume that if, for Sugar's devil fruit, if Sugar died and all of the toys were still in effect, if Sugar died, would they all revert back to being human and all of the memories return? Or would they just remain as toys and it wouldn't be able to be changed? Hancock mentioned to Blackbeard that, even if you take my devil fruit and give it to someone else, you can't undo my Mero powers. You can't undo them by someone else. Someone else cannot undo what was done by a previous user. Whether or not that was true or not, or that was just Boa bullshitting, bull crapping her way out of that being captured thing there, which, good on her if she's, thought about that right off on the bat or whatever in that regard. Good on her. But, what if pudding is able to help restore that? What if there is something there that needs to be restored? What if the memories that were taken from Imu-Sama are locked up somewhere, and either Imu-Sama doesn't know where they are, or doesn't know that that is what they are? And what if they need to find those memories, and then they need to put those memories back into Imu-Sama, and then that would help make Imu-Sama whole, restoring their heart, restoring what was taken from them. Now, as I said, that doesn't mean that Imu-Sama is instantly going to turn into an ally. They still have all of these past several hundred years where they were this, deity that was, nothing but, probably doing a lot of bad in the world, with cleansing and everything like that. But maybe it results in something that later on, if they end up interacting with Luffy, that there's triggers there where they keep seeing Joy Boy, and they keep having these moments where they keep thinking, but Joy Boy was my friend, or Joy Boy was my sibling, or my lover, or whatever, and then now there's this, but causes a lot of that inner turmoil, and maybe that is what is able to help Luffy with either defeating them, or eventually results in something, Imu-Sama having to make a decision, and they actually make the good decision, where they actually end up stopping whatever it is, destroying the giant laser cannon thing that they have, or they end up letting themselves be destroyed and letting the Tenryubito be destroyed as well. Not killing all of them, but having them be disbanded and actually be punished for all of the crimes that they've committed. What if there is something with that? I don't know. This is my thoughts. If you agree, or if you think there's something there, please comment. This was just something that I kind of thought sounded interesting in regards to, similarities between to Fiti and Calypso, and then like, well, maybe there's a One Piece concept here in regards to like something that is in regards to, you know, Imu-Sama or something along those lines. You know, Imu-Sama, since we don't know really anything about them, it's pretty easy to just like slap on like, oh, maybe there's this that they are, or maybe there's that, or maybe there's this, or there's these things, or whatever. And until that's revealed, until we get more information about Imu-Sama, actually, you know, physically see what they look like, we don't know. I mean, the same thing happened with Ryukogu, and the fact that, you know, some people are like, oh, he's going to end up being an ally, or no, he's going to end up being an enemy, or no, he's just going to be neutral, or oh no, he ended up being very much the Sakazuki fanboy that we were, the Sakazuki fanboy that we did not need in the world. We did not need that. So we'll see what happens. Those were just concepts that I thought of that I thought sounded interesting, and then I went off on different tangents. So maybe there's something there. Maybe I hit something on the head. We'll find out later on once we get more stuff with, you know, additional chapters and more information in the Void Century and everything else. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. The video ended up being longer than I intended it to be. Sorry, but if you watched all the way through, I thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.